I'm Nina Instead, host of the Already Gone podcast. Already Gone covers cases of the missing and the murdered from Michigan and the Great Lakes region, cases you may not have heard before. Already Gone started in 2016, so there is a big back catalog for you to explore. Find Already Gone on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcatcher.
You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we are here for 200 episodes. Mr. Thomas, 200 episodes.
Cue the applause sound. Hey, we have some applause here somewhere. Hold on.
Oh, that sounds crazy through my headphones. I can barely hear it, but I can't hear that there's applause. It's faint applause. What I really think you need is 76 trombones, which led the Grand Parade.
Can you
Sorry, Music Man reference?
Can you hear the sound effects?
I can't, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. They come through nice and loud in my headphones.
No, I can only hear just a tiny little bit.
Our Rodecaster came with built-in sound effects. There's even a wah-wah trumpet in here somewhere. And there's crickets.
I do hear the crickets now.
Okay. These are sound effects we could use. And of course, that one's appropriate for a true crime podcast.
This is the magic of podcasting, folks. And keep in mind, Bill's got all this on his end. Yeah. I do not have it on my end. He could technically, he could do that anytime he wanted, whenever I spoke, and I couldn't do anything about it.
And thankfully, I don't.
Yes, seriously. Thankfully, he doesn't.
I think the theme music for Mind Over Murder is loaded in here somewhere too, although I usually fly it in from another location.
We have good theme music.
We do have good theme music. It's from Kevin MacLeod, and we pay a little license fee for it, and they let us run wild.
I think we may need to run it a little more often because it's pretty excellent theme music, I gotta say. Maybe we can do a little dance remix of it or something like that.
Sometimes I listen to other people's true crime podcasts, not anywhere near as often as most people, because there's just not enough time to listen to and watch and read all of the things that we want to follow. I do listen to some other true crime podcasts occasionally, and I think, oh, we need more wind effects or spooky sounds or footsteps and crunching on gravel. Yes.
There are some podcasts that have a lot of production value to it.
Yeah,
I'm fine with us being where we are. It's served us well for 200 episodes and almost 3 years here.
Yeah, we're coming up on 3 years. That'll be at the end of the calendar year because remember, we're a pre-COVID podcast. We didn't start a podcast because of COVID. We started a year before COVID, didn't we?
Yes, we did. I know people were talking about, those people who started podcasts during COVID because they didn't have anything else to do. We had plenty to do.
We did.
Because of this podcast. We didn't start it during COVID. We started before. We started it when it was COVID. It was just a little blip of something going on the other side of the globe.
Absolutely.
We were here first.
We made a decision now, an executive decision, a joint one, as we usually do, that we're now starting season 3 with our episodes 200, 201, and 202 are now considered part of season 3.
We never really made a decision when we started how we were going to break up our seasons. Because as a TV buff, I think of seasons as okay, a season of CSI is like 24 episodes.
Right.
But we never had the discussion of how long was our season going to be. So somewhere in there, it was like, I think when we start the Colonial Parkway Murders, that'll be season 2. We just never at any point were like, so when do we end season 2 and start season 3? And I guess the answer is now.
Well,
now is when we do it.
It just occurred to me, as I mentioned to you earlier today, when we got to episode 200, I thought maybe we should turn a calendar page here. Season 3 started with episode 200, which is our latest interview with the Othram folks.
Yay, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I thought so too. Kristin Middleman and Carla Davis joined us for a 2-parter, which is getting fantastic reaction. I hope you've had a chance to listen to it. And if you haven't, please go back and take a listen, because it's a very interesting conversation with the two of them about what they're doing at Othram, but also how forensic genetic genealogy works, how they're using it to help solve cases, working with law enforcement. And they sound a very optimistic note, especially, I think, at the end of episode 2.
Yes.
In terms of the future of identifying unidentified remains and murder victims, as well as working with law enforcement to identify offenders and solve cases. There's no question that this cutting-edge technology is breaking cases, which is very exciting.
It really is. And we're so privileged, and I mean that in a positive sense, and not in the sometimes negative sense that people use it as. We are so privileged to know so many amazing people who are working so hard to push these cases forward. And it gives us a lot of hope, especially because that kind of hope can be hard to find.
Kristin Middleman mentioned that sense of hope and optimism on the part of family members who are looking for answers, whether their loved one has gone missing, has been sexually assaulted, murdered. It's difficult to find optimism in a situation like that, where you've lost someone or they've suffered a tremendous violation like sexual assault or murder. So for those who are left behind with nothing but questions, it's sometimes hard to find light in and a sense of hope in all of that. And actually, one of the things that Kristin and Carla really liked, and they were conveying in our discussion with them, is that hearing from family members, even if they aren't necessarily people who have the answers they're seeking yet. I certainly feel this way, but I hadn't realized that other people from other families would feel the same. As they explained it, I thought, this makes perfect sense, because I feel it. And just because it was buzzing around in my head, it hadn't occurred to me that other people might share that perspective. It feels great, actually, to hear about other family members getting answers.
Yeah.
So that sometimes when you feel like it's just nothing but darkness and dead ends and frustration, something like investigative genetic genealogy or forensic genetic genealogy, you can call it what you like, over the last, 4 or 5 years since the Golden State Killer and Bear Brook cases and others, all of a sudden there's a real cause for optimism, which feels good. And I get jazzed when I hear about a case getting solved.
Yeah, and I think you should. And definitely, I would say hope and optimism and that feeling that you want to be able to have not only about your case, but other people's cases is definitely something that we want to talk a little bit as we get into today's episode. So we do want to acknowledge the date. When we're recording this, it is Monday, October the 10th, and it has just passed the 36th anniversary of your sister's murder. That's a hard anniversary every year. I know it is. We've been together long enough now that I know this is a rough time of year for you. And it has become increasingly so for me as well. The more that I've known you and your family and the families of the victims, the harder it actually gets every year. It doesn't get easier. And so I do want to take a minute just to check in with you on not just my own behalf, but I think on behalf of everybody out here who knows you and cares about you and wants to know, like, how are you doing on this day? It is 36 years later, and we're still not any closer. And how are you doing with that today?
It's difficult. This 24, 48-hour period, the 9th or 10th, they're not 100% certain when my sister Kathy and her girlfriend Rebecca Dowski died. sometime between Thursday night, October 9th, 1986, and the following Sunday, which is October 12th. And that's when the car is found. This whole weekend, it's just very hard not to focus on the time of year. I was out walking the dog the other night, and I'm looking up at this very bright moon. It was cold and windy, and we're living here in Connecticut, so I'm not in Virginia where the Colonial Parkway murders took place. But it's really hard not to think about Kathy and Becky and all of the victims in the Colonial Parkway murders. And it's a difficult time. There's no question about it. I like the fall. There's a lot about the fall that I enjoy. Back to school feeling and the harvest and the leaves falling and crunching under your feet as you walk. And my family's from New England, so to be back here now in the Northeast reminds me of when we were kids. We had moved all over the country, but I have very strong memories of us moving back to Massachusetts when I was heading into high school. Kathy and Jack would have been in elementary school, and my older brother Richard would have been a senior in high school. This case just puts a negative cast, a negative slant on fall and October and all those things I like about this time of year. These dates, October 9th, 10th, it's really difficult. I find myself I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I was thinking about the transition from the 9th to the 10th. And like I said, there's the question still remaining about exactly when did they die. I've been talking to some people who've been exploring the case with us. And one guy in particular mentioned to me, he thinks that there's a possibility that Kathy and Becky were held somewhere for part or perhaps all of the time frame from Thursday night until Sunday. And it's just a horrible thought to just think about. But I found myself awake in the middle of the night last night. I got up and went down the hall. I left Pamela, my partner, and our dachshund, Oliver, sleeping. And I was just thinking about that, that transition from October 9th to October 10th. And I find myself thinking about, were they alive still at that point? Were they dead? It's just awful. It gets a little easier if I get a few more days into October and we get past the anniversary. And I was saying to a reporter the other day who's doing some background discussions about a possible story on the Colonial Parkway murders, and I resist something every single year, which is sometimes as we head towards the anniversaries of the various Colonial Parkway murders, someone will round the number up. Like, for instance, people had said to me in the August-September timeframe this year, 36 years. And I always push back against that because it's so hard watching the years tick by. So when people round up, I always say it's still really only 35. It's not 36 until October 10th. But now I can't do that. And so now I'm looking at stories that ran online last year for the 35th anniversary. And it's just a very frustrating time. And overall, we find ourselves at a very frustrating crossroads.
I remember that when we first started working together, it was the 29th anniversary. And we were talking about it. We really literally just started working together, but we were already talking about what can we do for the 30th anniversary? Like, what can we do to make sure that this is getting a lot of media attention? It does blow my mind that today we started together on 29 and here we are, it's 36. And how much further have we actually gotten? Like, how much? And I know that that question has to be double and even triply frustrating for you because you and your family have lived this longer. But even for me, who've been with this case for a relatively short time, it's frustrating looking at this and going, how much has actually changed? How much has advanced between 29 and 36? It doesn't feel like a lot, unfortunately. And I hate that. That's so frustrating.
And talking to the other family member, there's a tremendous amount of frustration. Everybody reacts differently.
Yeah.
And that's something I've actually come to understand and accept. And even during the time that I've been most actively involved in the Colonial Parkway murders, which is primarily since 2009, when the crime scene photo story broke, that the FBI had lost control of these 78 highly graphic crime scene photos. In talking to family members that I've gotten to know pretty well, there is a tremendous amount of frustration. It's palpable. They are so frustrated. Those of us that are handled by the FBI, which is the Thomas Dowski case, as well as Keith Call and Cassandra Haley, their disappearance and presumed murder, those are FBI cases, as we've talked about. And then the Robin Edwards David Noblin case and the Anna Maria Phelps Daniel Lauer case, which are handled by the Virginia State Police. All of those families have expressed a great deal of frustration with the status of their investigations. It can be maddening just to feel that there doesn't appear to be substantial forward progress. Now, I'm obviously closer to the details of the Thomas Dowski case and to a certain extent the Call Haley case. They're FBI cases, and I have more contact with the FBI than I would with the Virginia State Police because officially I have no role in the Edwards Nobbling or Phelps Lauer murders. Certainly I've talked to those families, but don't normally engage directly with the Virginia State Police. Those families at different times have expressed a great deal of frustration with the status of their investigations as well. You think to yourself, what's it going to take to get FBI and Virginia State Police to put time, attention, and resources into these cases in order to move them forward?
Exactly. And I wanted to make sure that I said as such when I posted this weekend on the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page, which we do hope everybody out here is following, by the way. We haven't had a lot to report on the page recently because there hasn't been a lot going on in the case recently. And that is horrifically frustrating because you know that there's all this behind the scenes maneuvering going on, or so the FBI says. They say we have stuff that's being tested. It's at Quantico. It'll be back any day now. I remember driving down to Savannah with Joyce Call a couple of weeks ago now. And I asked her, what is the latest that you've heard from our case agent? And she said, they say that there's evidence being tested and they should hear back any day now. Okay, any day now was a couple of weeks ago. Is any day now just going to be like a running set of time frames that could encompass weeks to months to years? At some point, it has to feel like they're just blowing you off and saying, any day now, like a little pat on your head like you would with a kid, sending you off to play. It feels patronizing and it feels frustrating. And if it feels that way for me, I know it's got to feel that way for you guys.
In that example specifically, evidence was taken for retesting and sent back to Quantico, and it's been a year since that evidence, which came from Keith Call's Toyota Celica, that would be where the evidence was extracted from, and objects inside Keith's Celica. We were told it was going to be 2 months, and that was over 12 months ago.
Yep.
And the FBI even sent it to an outside lab, one of the best DNA labs in the country, highly respected, and still no results. And I've said through gritted teeth to our FBI agents that I don't need to be reminded that we're a cold case and we're the lowest priority. As I've said to them, sometimes with barely concealed anger, we don't need to be reminded of the fact that we're a cold case. The ticking of the calendar pages and the passage of year after year with no answers has served as all the reminder we need that we're not a priority. As I said to the senior agent on the case a couple of months ago regarding current forensic testing, the pace of this forensic testing is ridiculously, insanely slow. It's not acceptable. The backlog at FBI Quantico is outrageous. The idea that it would take a year to get test results is insane. A couple of months, I get it. And I understand that no one's life is at risk. If someone is in a hostage situation or a kidnapping or a murder has just taken place, I get the fact that case would take precedence over our case. I understand that a terrorism case or something else that was urgent where lives are at stake at this moment, I understand those things go first in line. But we're so far at the back of the line for us to be waiting a year later for test results, first from Quantico, as well as an outside lab under contract to the FBI. This is ridiculous.
It feels even more so because we know from our friends at Othram, Dr. Middleman and his wife, and everybody over at Othram who has been so generous with their time and attention to us, we know that they can get results faster. We know that they can. It is possible. It is just that I keep joking, and one of these days I'm maybe going to not be joking about it, but I keep joking that one of these days I'm going to run a heist wherein a group of highly trained thieves, all dressed in black, sneak into the evidence vaults or wherever they keep this stuff and liberate evidence and send it out to labs that will actually do the testing.
Oh, sure. People have asked me recently about this. All of these amazing independent labs that are breaking cold cases across the country, including many people that we've interviewed on Mind Over Murder, and we will interview on the podcast in the future. We feel incredibly fortunate to have met these people, talked with these people, and learned from these amazing scientists. But almost every top investigative genetic genealogist in the country has said to you and me or me, just get me the evidence. We'll run the tests. They know how hard the Colonial Parkway Murders families have worked to get results and to move things forward in our case. People have said to me privately, don't worry about the money. If there's a cost, we'll find a way to pay for it. Just please, Bill, get me the evidence. If we had access, like you said, I remember when you told me this idea about the heist and stealing the evidence in our own case.
I've run it as a movie, but honest to God, part of me wants to do it in real life.
If we had access to the evidence, we would have run it through the system with all the top DNA labs in the country years ago.
Honestly, okay, I'll go pick it up at Quantico. I'll run it to Texas. Won't mind driving hours and hours to get it over to David and Kristin at Othram or really to anybody.
Sure.
And I really do think, because I want to make sure that we say it explicitly, both for the people who are listening, our podcast audience, but also for the FBI in case they're listening. Every top lab and geneticist in this country so far has offered to do the kind of testing on this case. Give up the evidence if you cannot do it at Quantico and let someone else do it. Please, these families deserve answers. Don't let the idea of we want to be the ones to break this case, don't let that hold you back from doing the right thing. Get the evidence to another lab if they can do it, and they can. I know the FBI I am not a stakeholder with the FBI. They could give a crap what I want. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who is an advocate for these families and as a podcaster and as somebody who cares about these victims and these families, please give the evidence up to a lab that will do it. Please.
We've been waiting for 36 years. Carl Knobling, who is David's father, just passed away.
Yeah.
Now that means that of the 16 parents of the 8 victims, we've now lost 9 of the 16.
That's unconscionable.
9 of the 16 mothers and fathers in the Colonial Parkway murders have died waiting for answers. We're down to 7 family members. We have entire parental units who are gone now. My parents are gone. The Calls are gone. Both of the Lauer parents are gone. Some people have said to me very bitterly, family members and others have said, I think they're waiting for all of us to die. So we'll just shut up. You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. Something else that's come up recently, and I had a very, I don't want to say heated, but somewhat contentious conversation with the senior agent in charge of this case. when he said to me they didn't have the funds. I want to be clear here. The FBI senior agent has said to me repeatedly in the last few months that they do not have the funding available to conduct advanced forensic testing, that is testing at 2022 cutting edge technology in the Colonial Parkway murders. And I said flat out to the senior agent, I like this man, but I said, you have got to be kidding. You're telling me that the FBI doesn't have the money to conduct the testing required to solve these cases? And I actually said to him, the FBI is probably into the Colonial Parkway murders for tens of thousands of hours. A lot of great work has gone into these cases over the course of now 36 years. You're not willing to find the funds to conduct advanced forensic testing that'll push one or more of these incidents over the finish line and could lead to a conclusion, potentially identifying a suspect or suspects plural. He actually said repeatedly, we don't have the funds. So then I said, the Colonial Parkway murders families have had some success with fundraising, not just the Thomas family, the other families, particularly the Colin Haley families.
Oh, yeah, they're great at that.
Raised funds. They'd had car shows and fish fries and all sorts of get-togethers. This is primarily in Virginia. And they'd raised tens of thousands of dollars, which they used for private investigator, travel. We did the billboards on Route 64 to get the word out about the case. So worthwhile things. And I said, look, we're not made of money, but the families could raise funds. And we have tens of thousands of followers on the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page, on the Mind Over Murder Facebook page. We've had 800,000 downloads. We have thousands of people that listen to this podcast. And without asking the question, or at least not asking the question yet, I said to the senior agent, I'm pretty confident we could raise the funds necessary to pay for any private labs. Yeah, and he actually said, we cannot accept gifts of that type. And I said, what? And he said, the federal government cannot accept gifts of the type you're describing. And I said,
Catch-22.
This is a catch-22. Now you're painting us into a corner. Now you're saying, literally, the FBI doesn't have the money to conduct the advanced forensic testing, which we think could help break the Colonial Parkway murders and identify suspects. And then when I say, okay, we'll find a private way to raise the funds, you tell me that's not acceptable. I told him flat out, I said, your answer, with all due respect, your answer is not acceptable. And I said, I want to be clear here. I'm not accepting this as an answer. I also want to be clear, we're not going away. And we need to find a way to do this. Now, there may be a possibility in the Virginia State Police parts of the case, particularly, I think, the Edwards Knobling case. There's some DNA evidence there. With the Phelps-Lauer case, incident number 4 on Interstate 64, I'm not a scientist, but what the investigators have told us is they don't have a lot to work with there from a scientific perspective, from a DNA evidence perspective. We do have some badly degraded DNA evidence in the Robin Edwards David Knobling case. Yeah. And that's a case that's controlled by the Virginia State Police. So it's possible, and we're going to try to explore this through the families, it's possible that we might be able to raise funds to pay for advanced forensic testing in Edwards Knobling. Wouldn't it be amazing if we were able to identify potential perpetrator, offender in that case? Because the rules may be different, and this is something we're exploring now, for the Commonwealth of Virginia versus the United States government, the federal government that the FBI is working under. At the same time, there has got to be a way for us to pay for any forensic testing done by a private lab if it's necessary to cover those costs. And I understand that those labs are amazing. Typically, you're talking about $5,000 or so, which is what Othram and Parabon and other labs are charging, which, by the way, I'm sure doesn't even actually cover their full costs. They're just trying to establish that this science and this approach works, which is why they're setting a price of $5,000. When you think about the technology that's involved, I don't think $5,000 is actually covering their costs. But my point
Probably
is,
not.
I'm pretty confident that we could come up with the money. You can't just throw these catch-22s at us and say, oh, but we can't let that happen.
This is certainly not the kind of thing that I imagine most people think of when they think about navigating the bumpy road that comes with having a loved one who's murdered. I don't think terribly many people have stopped to consider that there are these sorts of things that the FBI or the state police will throw at you with, oh, we don't have the money to fund this. We don't have the manpower. The evidence got degraded. Oh, we lost control of the crime scene photos. It seems like the Colonial Parkway murders, both the VSP and the FBI cases, have been astoundingly unique situations that most people would never even have to consider being in. And you guys have all handled it so gracefully and so well over the years that I have worked with you. I frankly, sometimes I don't know how you get out of bed in the morning and do what you do, Bill. And I would say the same is true for Joyce, the Haley sisters, anybody else. I don't know how you guys put one foot in front of the other some days, because this is hard. And it's hard for me, and I'm not even a family member. My hat's off to you guys for what you've had to navigate and what you continue to still navigate.
Thank you. I think the only answer I can give you is that you're not given a choice. What's happened has happened. These tragic events have taken place. I do understand that this is really difficult. It's difficult for all of us. I don't think we're always as graceful as you think we are, but I think sometimes it's a matter of privately finding ways to bang your head against the wall when you're alone, or when I talk to Joyce or her brother Chris Call or Terry Haley or her sister Paula. There's anger. There's real anger and frustration and discouragement and sadness at times. This is a maddening place to find yourself, and particularly to be hit with what feels like foot dragging and excuses and delays, and to be told, oh, we can't do this advanced test because we don't have the funds. Are you serious? The United States government doesn't have enough money to cover a $5,000 DNA test? And then even if I accepted that ridiculous bullshit answer and said, okay, we'll find a way to raise the funds. Like I said, we're not made of money, but I'll take it out of my 401k, and then we'll figure out a way to reimburse the Colonial Parkway Murders Victims Fund. We'll find a way to pay for it, but you can't then say, oh, the FBI won't pay for it, and you can't pay for it either. And then the DNA labs are saying, look, forget the money. Just give me the evidence and I'll test the evidence for you. We'll work it out. As you said earlier, Kristin, if we could control the evidence, we would have already had these tests conducted. When I first reached out to Paul Holes, Barbara Ray Venner, Steve Kramer from the FBI, and others, this is 4 or 5 years ago now when the Golden State Killer case broke, I reached out to these people and introduced myself and ended up talking to them on the phone. And I was always having the same conversation, telling them who I was and then saying, can you tell me about what you did here with the Golden State Killer case? This is so interesting. And I think this idea that you had could be used for other cases. And of course, it has been now hundreds and hundreds of times. But you have to have law enforcement agencies willing to take a chance and find the funding. And we've seen at Othram in particular, they've also had a great deal of success with crowdfunding, where they'll put it out there. You and I have contributed to those testing, fundraising mechanisms, and we've promoted them. It's fantastic when you see that put in my $50 or $100 or whatever it is. And look, somebody else could put in $5. If we all work together, it helps them move forward cases that wouldn't otherwise be seeing testing done at this level, if at all. Then they're turning around and providing law enforcement with viable leads that are leading to identifying unidentified remains, naming potential suspects, and then law enforcement runs them down. And we're seeing cases solved all over the place. But you've got law enforcement who are willing to partner with these amazing labs across the country, and cases are getting solved. I feel like right now with the Colonial Parkway murders, we're getting nothing but static from the FBI and the Virginia State Police. They're like coming up with reasons to say no, as opposed to let's find a way to get to yes.
And for me, I see that as it's institutional stubbornness, for sure. We're the ones who are going to do it, if anybody's going to do it at all, and we can do it best. And to a certain extent, I also think it's arrogance. I think it's, we don't want some other people to solve this case. We're going to solve this case. It's going to be us. That's arrogant. And it is doing a major disservice to the families. I get mad about a lot of things, but I don't generally show that. But this is the one thing here recently that it's making my blood pressure consistently run up. That and battling cell phones with my students. Those are the two things that are really getting my blood pressure going here recently.
So what is it?
But it really is, it's just that sense of stubbornness and arrogance that we're not passing this off to another lab. We're the FBI, we'll solve it. Clearly you can't. Your lab either isn't as good as you think it is, as you say it is, or your lab is so backed up that you're never going to get around to our evidence, in which case, please hand it over to someone else who can do it. It just infuriates me that this sense of either stubbornness, arrogance, or a combination of both is keeping the FBI from handing over this evidence to somebody who we know can do something with it. You give it to Othram, they can break this case in, a couple months. And we wouldn't have to wait anymore. We wouldn't have to get to 37.
I've said to the FBI agents who are working our case, you break this case and I will sing your praises to the skies.
Yep.
This isn't about which lab does the testing. It's about the fact that the backlog at FBI Quantico Labs is so outrageous, so bad, that it's taken us over a year to get results, which we still don't have in the latest go-round of testing in Keith Call's Toyota Celica. And it makes us crazy to be told we should have results in 6 to 8 weeks. Call that 2 months. And now it's been well over 12. I think we may even be at 14 months now.
Probably.
This is insane. Yeah. And if you think I sound fired up, try talking to the Colin Haley families. This is their sister and brother's case. They feel like they're getting shined on by the Federal Bureau of Investigation after being told 6 to 8 weeks, and now it's been at least 12 months.
Like I said, Joyce and I had 7 hours in the car together going down to Savannah, and she read me text after text from the case agent that you guys have worked with, and it is just no results yet. Hope to hear soon. Oh, no results yet. Nope, still no results. Going to be here fairly soon. No, really. I hope it'll be soon. And it's, come on. How can you keep responding that way? How can you, in your heart of hearts, I know that your case agent is a good person. I know that they mean, and I know that they really want to see this case solved. But how can they, in their heart of hearts, continue to respond? Hopefully soon. It's not going to be soon. It's just not. It's been over a year.
It's hard for me to take a law enforcement agent and their agency seriously when we're seeing delays like this. And I need to be clear here. This latest round of testing with the Call Haley evidence is not the only evidence we'd like to see tested.
Right.
If every single go-round, they send in a certain number of items, usually 3 or 4 or something like that. You're not going to send 50 or 100 items. I don't think we have that many, but let's just say. You're not going to send that many lots in for testing. That means that you send in items, you get results, and if those don't give you what you want, then you're going to perhaps send in other items. But if every single time it's taking a year to get an answer, it's no wonder we're at 36 years in Thomas Dowski. We're really frustrated and unhappy. We are going to continue to put pressure on the FBI and the Virginia State Police in the coming months to stop throwing up roadblocks, stop finding ways to say no, and start finding some ways to get to yes.
And I remember when we first started working together on this case, and I would caution you every once in a while, Bill, you don't want to get too fired up about this. Bill, you got to stay calm. Bill, we can't talk about this on the podcast the way that you do. And now I think I messaged you earlier today and I said, I'm willing to stir some stuff up. Let's do this. Let's talk about it on the pod. I get where you come from when you get so upset and frustrated. I really do. I hate seeing that this is just a continual source of frustration over and over again for you and for all the families, because it just isn't fair. Where is the justice in this? Our great friends over at Real Crime Profile have always had a wonderful hashtag that I really like, which is justice delayed is justice denied. I still feel that very much in my heart. Justice delayed is justice denied. And the more and more that you delay the testing and delay everything else about this case, the longer it is going to take to find the person who did this and to bring them to justice.
We'll close out the conversation today by trying to end on a positive note, which is this. We very much appreciate all of the support that all the people that listen to Mind Over Murder, follow the Colonial Parkway Murders, and Mind Over Murder on social media have expressed over the years. We hope that you'll continue to show us that support and that good faith and that hope and optimism. And I'm not a terribly religious man, but boy, it doesn't hurt my feelings at all when people say we're praying for you, because I think we need all of those things in order to move this case and these incidents towards an appropriate conclusion, which is identifying offenders and bringing these cases to justice.
I can't think of anything better to close with other than to say that on this October 10th, I would like to honor the memory of Kathleen Marion Thomas and Rebecca Andowski. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.